I keep thinking tonight, as I listen to folks talk, I kept thinking about a quote from Václav Havel, who is a great dissident and poet and playwright and head of state, of all things. He was the last president of Czechoslovakia and the first president of the Czech Republic, and a real honest-to-goodness artist and a head of state. That rarely happens, not to cast any disparagement on George Bush's poetry, but it rarely happens, and he's got a lot to teach us, and he's still with us, thankfully. Václav Havel said, "Hope is not prognostication, it is an orientation of the spirit." Sit with that for a minute. Hope is not prognostication. It's not a prediction. It's not what we think is going to happen. It is an orientation of the spirit. It is a choice. We can choose to live in hope, or we can choose to live in despair. If we live in despair, we live in inaction. If we live in inaction, the outcome is predictable. If we live in hope, the outcome is, at best, unpredictable. We don't know for sure where it's going to go. But we know what's going to happen if we yield to the despair. So how do we make a change? There are all these huge changes to make. What are we going to do? Well, to consider that question, I think we have to consider what works, what changes things. As a culture, we tend to believe that what changes things is heroes, dramatic people doing dramatic things in dramatic moments. Wesley Autry on the platform in the New York subway when the young man has an epileptic seizure and falls into the tracks. Wesley Autry was a very courageous man who left his 2 daughters sitting in the care of strangers on the platform so that he could jump in and try to get this young man out of the tracks before the train came. But the train was coming too fast, so he couldn't get him out in time. So what he did was he laid down on top of him while the train went over. You guys remember this? This was in the papers a few years ago, right? That was unquestionably a heroic action. I give huge props to Wesley Autry. But that's not the kind of action that changes the whole nation. It doesn't change the culture. We love that myth so much. We love this idea of dramatic people doing dramatic things in dramatic moments so much that we completely force a story like Rosa Parks' story into that myth. For most of us, Rosa Parks' life was one day long, December 1st, 1955, the day she got arrested, right? I learned about that day in school, and I learned that Rosa Parks was this charming little old lady who was just tired, and in the spur of the moment, she decided that she wasn't going to take it anymore, and she refused to give up her seat on the bus. Well, for one thing, she wasn't a little old lady, she was 42, and can I just get an amen that 42 is not old? It just happens to be the lens I'm looking at the world through for the next couple of weeks, and then my lens shifts, but she wasn't a little old lady, and most importantly, she wasn't making a spur-of-the-moment decision. Rosa Parks had been the secretary of the NAACP for 12 years by the time she was arrested December 1st, 1955. Not only that, like one of our speakers here tonight, she trained at the Highlander Center in Tennessee in nonviolent activism for 10 days, the summer before she was arrested. She was a trained activist. But we don't want to tell that story, because if we tell that story, well, that suggests all kinds of things for what our actions might be. Here's why this matters, this hero myth. If heroes change things in dramatic moments with dramatic actions, then here are your instructions if you want to change things. Step 1, wait. Wait for the moment, watch for it, be ready, then do the courageous thing. But if activism works, day to day, day in, day out activism, step 1 is get to work.